So as that continues, I'm now very fortunate to be able to introduce Ron. And as context here, I'm going to say never in the history of industry has a new association accomplished so much in so short a time frame. And obviously, I'm channeling Winston Churchill, but to be absolutely clear, the things that the Blockchain Association accomplished in the years that led up to the election before Christmas and that continue now as the Blockchain Association is helping all of Washington make the US the world's blockchain and crypto leader is quite remarkable. And this time last year, we had Kristen Smith, the president. We also had two candidates, one of which was Bernie Moreno, who famously beat Sherrod Brown in Ohio and is currently sitting in Washington, helping move forward our industry. I believe he's also on the Senate Banking Committee now. So that was last year. And here we are this year. And I'm very fortunate that Ron Hammond is joining us. Ron, I think a good place to start is for you just to tell everyone who is the Blockchain Association, what does it do, and then what does Ron do over there? That would be a great place to start, I think.
Sounds good. Thanks, Matthew. Really appreciate you guys having me here. A lot to cover, so I can't wait to dive into it. But in short, the Blockchain Association is a trade association based in DC, comprised of US-based crypto native firms. So that's your large exchanges, like your Coinbases, your Kraken. You have more of the DeFi applications as well. So your Uniswaps, DYDX, we have Compound as well. The individual tokens as well. So your Ripple Labs, Consensus, Solana Labs, and plenty of other folks down there. And then more in the venture capital crowd too. So A16Z, Paradigm, True Ventures, North Island Ventures, and several more. So pretty much if it touches the crypto ecosystem and they're based in the United States, we probably have them in our membership. We're about 140, I believe now, which is crazy. When I started at the Blockchain Association, I think 5 years ago, it was on 30. So we've really risen a lot since then, but the work has only increased. And then at least myself personally, I've been to BA, like I said, for 5 years. I guess now I'm currently the only lobbyist within the association. I did have a Democrat with me. We didn't split up. I did the Republicans, he did Democrats. He went to actually lead another trade association. So I'll be building a team shortly. But for right now, Republicans are in control. So that's good for me since I have all those contacts. But my background before I even came to BA was working for Representative Warren Davidson from Ohio. He's the man who replaced John Boehner. And several years ago, when I was his Hill staffer doing finance policy for him, there was a desire for him to work on his own piece of legislation. And Congress is very territorial. It's like a high school. And so people say, hey, I want to work on venture capital issues or Reg A, Reg D. It's like, nope, that's taken. Sorry, someone else has this. In 2017, the senator just goes, like, I don't know, just take crypto. No one, and it was very much of a like brush off, please get out of here. And the congressman turns to me and goes, do you know anything about crypto? And I'm like, well, all I know is people bought fake IDs in college with it, but that's pretty much it. And this is, back in 2011 when Bitcoin was just around. He's the only thing in the Silk Road. But lo and behold, like that's how I kind of made a name for myself. Is I met all the industry players back in 2017, 2018. We hosted a roundtable at the Library of Congress because we couldn't get a hearing. We just said we'll just do our own hearing. So we brought 50 executives and 5 members of Congress from both sides of the aisle. And eventually that work product was the Token Taxonomy Act, which is the first market structure bill it's bipartisan too, thank God, that basically regulates crypto markets for the SEC and CFTC. And that's kind of culminating, large elements of that into what we're seeing now play out in Congress, which is a very active Congress. And Barr did a really good job highlighting the campaign element to that, which I'm happy to cover in more detail as well. But in short, it was really bad for quite some time in DC for the crypto industry, but I've seen it go from something that no one really cared about to the most vilified force, at least for the Biden administration, to now the darlings of Capitol Hill. And it's a crazy 180 to see. So happy to get into any and all of that.
Yes, thank you, Ron. That was very helpful. And I do want to cover that. I think we're going to talk about past, present, and future. and that will take up our half hour. So I do just want to talk a little bit about the past. I think there are people that are saying that the only reason senators and House members are embracing this space is because they want to make a lot of money and they're billionaires and so on. In fact, that is one of the narratives we're right now hearing. I want you to just to explain to our audience, what was it that unlocked this space in the heads of the politicians? You know them, you were interacting with them. What was the big unlock that occurred before the election that led to where we are today?
Candidly, it's a lot of it's market driven in my experience. And so whenever there would be a major bull run or major hacker scandal, that's usually, I would say, about a month or two afterwards. Capitol Hill would be lagging behind, but that's usually where those meetings would occur. So when I was on Capitol Hill back up till 2020, we were doing meetings with senators when I was a Hill staffer, trying to get the Senate Banking Committee just to care about crypto at all. And it's very much of this is so small, no one cares. FTX really brought crypto on the map, at least in DC, and that was more of a money angle. And we learned obviously that wasn't his money he was throwing around; that was his customer funds. And so that became instant 180, where crypto was vilified. And for the most part of 2023, most of the Democrats, especially, would not take meetings with anyone in the crypto industry. And for us at the Blockchain Association, we didn't even have FTX as a member because they're not U.S. based. So their damage is unfortunately felt on our end too. But then again, we've been working on this for years to get to this point, but it took to the SEC going so aggressive against the industry and suing pretty much, if you were a top 10, top 20 company in the United States, the SEC had a lawsuit against you or one of your major partners, very likely. And again, and for most cases, they got thrown out the second the Trump administration came in. And so we just saw the biggest one today with Ripple being thrown out. And that's a huge win for the industry. But that's for the longest time, the industry, to Bart's point, we were on the ropes. And then finally decided to say, we're going to play the DC game. We're going to get involved in the campaign side, and we're going to get folks to notice. And I will say we have done that better than any industry that I've personally seen, at least in my experience, both within Capitol Hill and outside Capitol Hill. For example, last week we had two major votes, and they could have easily gone partisan. Typically, the Republicans are going to be favorable to the industry. That's usually how Republicans usually are, the pro usually industry, whatever the industry may be. But in this case, we got over 2/3 of the Senate, as well as 2/3 of the House, to vote in support of this crypto rule. And it was, at least in that specific crypto rule, it was unwinding a Biden era tax regulation. Really niche, really small, but very, very, very bipartisan. And they also passed, we were talking about stablecoins on a panel earlier. There's a stablecoin regulations that the Republicans are leading up in Congress right now. That bill had gotten more bipartisan support than any other financial services bill that's passed out of that committee that eventually got signed to law. And again, the last big one was back in 2018. And so for this bill to have that much bipartisan support, it's a combo probably of the industry is finally maturing. It's a combo probably of the campaign funds. It's also the very much political apparatus of, hey, they're here to stay. And the Democrats, especially someone on the progressive side, made a campaign mistake trying to cross this industry, and they paid for it. And so it's kind of nice to have that political muscle. It's very rare. I've never had this in the past 10 years, but it's nice to have it. And it's showing up in the vote counts too. So like we're feeling really confident that we're gonna get a lot of good stuff these next 2 years.
Great, Ron. So that's sounding very optimistic already. One question I wanted to ask you very specifically about the population that sits behind all of these elected officials. We all know that about 2% of the US electorate ages out every year, and 2% of young people come in every year, which means that by 2026, 4% more of the US population, and about by 2028, 8% more of the US population will be digital natives, and the digital natives are almost all pro blockchain and crypto. Does Washington really understand that this is sort of an inevitable movement in terms of the aging of the population and their sentiments?
Yeah, there was that for the longest time. Some folks are trying to say this is a Republican versus Democrat issue, but it was very, like, at least in my experience, and that's kind of gone mainstream now. It's, hey, it's generational. And at least in Congress, so take the Democrats, for example, they have internal rules that whoever's in charge of the committee. So in our issue area, to Senate Banking Committee, if you're the top Democrat there, you can stay there as long as you want. You can basically be there until you leave office. And so there's an incentive to A, get to the top, but also be the top. And once you're there, you want to stay because you get to decide what bills have hearings, what bills get votes on, and what bills don't. It's a very powerful position. Whereas Republicans, they shift out their leadership every 6 years. Regardless of the person's great or not, that person goes away. And especially, so that's why I think we had a little issue with the Democrats, because a lot of their, at least internal politics, are driven from the top down. And it has its benefits, it has its drawbacks, whereas the Republicans are a little more haphazard. But we saw a lot of the Democrat older generation being a little opposed to this, and the Republican older generation, they're opposed to this too. They think this solves a lot of problems that don't exist. And again, that was back in 2017, 2018. And now they might not understand crypto, but they understand this is where the population's going, and they're getting in line for the most part. So the generational shift is there. But don't get me wrong, when there's a market hiccup, again, FTX being one of them, for example, there was a thought in DC, and a prevailing thought for some folks in the Biden administration, that this is the last thing for crypto. Crypto's on its last breath. And as someone who's been in the industry for years, like I was saying, guys, I've seen some of these stuff before for many times. And guess what? They're not only back the next year, they're back stronger than ever. And that's the same case with the FTX situation. So it's not going anywhere. It's here to stay for good.
Great. Thanks, Ron. So talking a little bit about what's currently on the agenda, in the executive orders, it was pretty clearly defined, not just who should work on what, but also by when, within the 100 days or within the 180 days, we need to see this or that. So can you just give us the update in terms of what are the major planks of legislation that are going through the process on behalf of the industry? What are the timelines? What do you think it's going to look like?
Sure thing. So right now, the main focus is going to be Congress. There were some executive orders. I'm happy to get into that. But at a high level, it was rolling back a lot of the damages from the Biden administration, like preventing banks from getting involved in crypto. That all went away with the Trump administration executive orders. So for the most part, it seems, I think we'll see some more executive action soon. But for the most part, we believe the administration's kind of done, at least leading the charge here. So it kicks over to Congress. I mentioned those two votes that happened last week in Congress. The big one to look out for is the stablecoin bill. We were talking earlier on one of these panels about stablecoins being really important for some market failures in the past to make sure that the stablecoin that you say is $1 value, that there's a $1 out there in a bank account somewhere that's corresponding with it. And make sure the reserves are actually up to snuff, as well as the redemptions are up to snuff as well. So creating those basic parameters, even though it's not a hostile administration anymore, just having those basic parameters are really important. There's a lot of questions currently around Congress on Tether, because Tether's not based in the United States, but of course they utilize the United States dollar. And they are a major part of the crypto ecosystem. There's not an effort to ban them by any means, but there's a lot of concern from both sides of the aisle that this major player in United States treasuries is not located in the United States, even though it's a great company and then doing gangbusters in terms of their profits. But there is some concern, at least in Congress there. So for the next 2 or 3 months, stablecoins is going to be the hot topic. That's likely to get to the president's desk. I would say probably the earliest May, but I'll probably say June, July timeframe, but probably definitely end before August, before they go to recess. And then we kick off to the next big bill, and that's the market structure bill. This is the one where a lot of the court cases that have been dropped recently were around, and this is still a major present issue for the industry, and has been, regardless of who's in power. Hey, is it a security? Are you talking to the SEC? Or are you talking about a commodity? Or are you talking to the CFTC? And there have been different legal opinions on a lot of these fronts here, but Congress is the ultimate decider. And this is a tough issue to regulate. It's not for the faint of heart. And again, a lot of these projects have already been started and are in different stages in terms of decentralization. And it's going to be tough for Congress to future-proof this legislation. But overall, they seem determined to move forward. And the regulators seem to give Congress a little deference here. So I would expect the fall to be really heavily focused on market structure and the SEC and the CFTC. But again, the upside is that this is all positive for the industry here. This is something we've been wanting for a long time. But when you get into the nitty gritty, it gets a little tough. That's what you have trade associations like us for. We have to combine all the different voices and different thoughts into one cohesive mind share, and that can be a little tough sometimes. But that's what we're here for. It's the tough stuff.
Thank you, Ron. So you've mentioned the two big blocks of legislation. The other thing that obviously is occurring is the rotation of the key oversight entities. So the CFTC, the SEC, the FDIC, and so on. I'm not sure how involved the Blockchain Association gets with influencing the decisions around the federal entities that oversee our industry. Is there anything you can share about what you're seeing in terms of the leadership of those organizations?
Definitely, you're right. It is tough traditionally just to lobby the entities. Very much, it's more done via public comment letters or public meetings. And again, lobbying, it's more just educating purposes. But what's different between this administration than the previous Trump administration we had to deal with, as well as the Biden administration, is the actual administration, the White House itself, being that unifying factor. Whereas beforehand, we could have, and this happened a lot in the Biden administration, the CFTC, the commodities regulator, would disagree legally with the securities regulator. And take Ethereum, the second largest cryptocurrency out there, massive implications. The SEC in their lawsuit said it's a security. And about a couple months later, the CFTC said, no, it's a commodity. And so you're a company getting involved in that asset class. These carry some stiff penalties here. And that's where a lot of the innovation chilling was happening, was these legal parameters and crossing that line meant a lot. And you put it up to enormous risk. And even though that enforcement risk has dissipated with the Trump administration, having that unifying factor when one agency might be going rogue or might be going a little out of bounds or out of step with the others. And candidly, we've already had that happen a little bit already in the Trump administration this go around. But having that unifying factor of a crypto czar, David Sachs, as well as Bo Hines as executive director, being that unifying centralizing point where all the agency heads talk to each other through that kind of, I guess, portal or working group, has been already helpful. And we have not seen that before. And that's where personally, I've seen that in action already. I upped my chances of both stablecoin bill and market structure bill getting done. I was saying stablecoin bill, probably 9% chance in these next 2 years. Market structure, 50-50. I'm upping market structure now to 75%, 80%, just because of that unifying factor. And especially if you see, at least this go around with Congress, whatever the Trump administration wants, they'll largely get it even with these thin majorities. And once he's got buy-in, which Trump is now personally involved, both from his family sense, but also just politically being present at these roundtables and present at these events. He just teased on Twitter he might be doing an announcement shortly on crypto soon. So we'll see what that is. But once he's involved, things tend to move. So it's a good sign for the industry.
Great, thank you. So I've got a couple of questions popping up in the Q&A, and I do encourage the entire audience to put their questions in. We'll get to those in just a second. The last question I want to ask you, though, is, we do have a lot of very active investors with us today. Some of them are probably already members of the Blockchain Association, but a lot of the people who are listening in and will listen to this recording later have nothing to do with the Blockchain Association. So is there a way for people who are invested in this space to get involved? What would you recommend that a family office or wealth advisor do if they want their voice to be heard?
Of course. So at least at the Blockchain Association, we do have several firms. If you want to inquire about membership, feel free to reach out to me either on Twitter, Ron W. Hammond, or just email me, ron@theblockchainassociation.org. Some other good avenues, though, even for more individuals. And this has actually been something that I've seen. I used to run campaigns several years ago before I got into DC. But there's Stand with Crypto, which is an organization that's a lot more of the grassroots focused. And it's to be that grassroots element to not only the Fair Shake PAC, but also to show that there's actually a voter base that cares about crypto when it comes to the election. And like many, I did not think that this organization would actually yield much results. But we actually saw a pretty decent amount during the campaign cycle in November. Voter turnout because of crypto, even with all the other issues out there that were facing our country and many things that folks into the polls for, crypto came up. And we've noticed that even a lot of the folks who are hostile, especially the elected folks, earlier on have definitely changed their tone, and they've pointed to actually the grassroots. So Stand with Crypto is a great organization. If you're a larger firm and looking to play the big dollar packed space, I would look at the Fair Shake PAC. I would also go to the Cedar Innovation Fund. They're kind of like the foray into the Fair Shake world. So I would also look to them. But the last thing I'll say too is that this administration has been very, as you've seen already with the White House summit that happened 2 to 3 weeks ago, where President Trump had a bunch of CEOs in at the White House to discuss his priorities. There's going to be several more of those, it seems like. So I would buckle up because I think there's going to be a lot more Trump involvement here. And there's other ways to get involved. That would probably be larger on the donor side versus more the political operative side, like hiring lobbyists.
Great, thanks, Ron. So one question I do want to ask you, it did cross my mind as well, that the organization underneath our president, his family, if you will, launched some tokens. And then we heard from members of the family that maybe US created tokens should be free of capital gains. And of course, that particular topic could be worth billions of dollars in taxes not paid, if you see what I'm saying. So the question I sort of have, Ron, or in fact the person that wrote it has, is what are the checks and balances to ensure that new regulations don't allow people to manipulate tokens for their own profit?
Yeah, I don't know who was saying the capital gains rumor. That someone was spreading that within the media. It's not true. I know that there were some efforts that were made on the lobbying side here, but there's a major tax bill going through Congress this year. So anything involving touching the budget or touching taxes, that was never going to be touched. So I don't know why the media ran with it, but just warning folks out there, there was a proposal to push it from the lobbying side, not Blockchain Association, but with a tax year, it's not going to happen. Now the reserve, there was other pushes like the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve that folks are doing, and that did happen on that front. But it's more of a stockpile where the government doesn't sell the currencies they get through seizures and such, but they don't actually use taxpayer dollars to go out and buy more crypto. So sorry. So going back to your original point here, this is the Trump administration that does come with a lot of accusations of such. Some people are looking at World Liberty Financial. That's the element you were referring to, and there's some questions there. I think the opposition parties already jumped on it. I think the more concern was the meme coin that Trump launched before he became president, but after the Biden administration, regulators were gone. And we've seen a pushback from folks in Congress on both sides of the aisle on the meme coin. We've seen legislation introduced on that. I can see that piece of legislation likely getting involved in the major bill that I referenced on market structure, where it bars any elected officials from launching a meme coin, which I think it makes sense. But some people probably will push back on that. But overall, it will cause political hurdles, but I point to the dynamic that exists right now that can change very quickly in Trump world. But right now, when Trump says to do something, even with a 1 vote margin that the Republicans have in the House, they are able to get their wild set of members to get in line. So until that changes, they're calling the shots. The Republicans seem to be pretty good, gun ho, at least the next year and a half. So. But we'll see. As a Republican and someone in crypto, we are watching this, and there's a lot of folks in the industry who are very much concerned with the World Liberty Financial. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, thanks, Ron, and thanks for being so candid about that. There was a question which I suppressed. So just to be clear on that, earlier on in this segment, Ron, I think you said that it was the aging leadership of both parties that didn't necessarily understand. I think one of our audience thought you were targeting that specifically at the Democrat side, but I heard you say both sides, there was a generational issue about the understanding of the space. So that's why I did suppress that question. And the last question that I have, which actually serendipitously is exactly as we're about to run out of time, is what does it specifically mean to be a member of the Blockchain Association? What is membership? And what would a company or a firm joining you be signing up for? Can you just take us through that, please?
Yeah, sure thing. And just to quickly touch your last point, I just want to highlight that the first major crypto lawsuit from the SEC actually happened from the Trump administration, wasn't the Biden administration. So the Republicans have been bad on this issue too. They've come around. But that's actually the lawsuit that got resolved today. So happy Ripple Day. In terms of the Blockchain Association, again, I've seen this association grow since I was a Hill staffer. They actually launched it at that big roundtable I referenced at the Library of Congress years ago when I was a Hill staffer to bring folks together. And Blockchain Association, Kristen Smith was a fantastic person to bring folks together. And that's I like, at least where I'm at currently. I love this industry. I love this space. And what I love BA in particular is that this space moves, as some folks know very well, it moves very, very fast. And doesn't have to be a blockchain association member company. If anything involves crypto, whether it be, politics or just more market updates, at least at BA, we have we have signal chats with every single company, as well as like working groups, as well as member chats of like 700 people. But the idea is that we are in rapid communication, what's happening in real time, because obviously in crypto, time matters. And that's what I think we do really good at BA, is being a rapid fire, both response to governments when something happens. That's my job. We have folks internally, hey, breaking down lawsuits or breaking down legal actions, breaking down amendments that come in. But speed is important, especially in crypto. So it's probably why I'm still single after doing this job for 5 years. You don't have time to have much life outside of that, but I love it. This is a great industry. BA is great. So if you have any inquiry to get involved, and the last thing I'll finally say too is, at least within BA, I do feel like the industry really is like all together here. We have folks who are actively competing against each other in the marketplace, but there's an understanding that, hey, within DC, especially the last administration, we had Target on all of our backs, and we got to all work together. And I like doing that, where we can bring the entire industry, as much herding cats it is. It's fun to like at least just bring folks together and like collaborate. So you'll have like CEOs and CEOs going back and forth in the middle of the night, which is cool to see. At least have that like open, transparent dialogue. So again, it's great. Come join. The water's fun, and I'm always happy to answer any questions, DC, BA, or anything else. But thanks for having me.
Yes, well, thanks, Ron. And 5 years is a long time. When the internet was rolling out, we still had Stop the Internet Now issues arise 20 years after it began. So unfortunately, Ron, I think you're going to be whacking moles for a long, long time. But we really appreciate what you do, what the Blockchain Association does. And it's, as investors, it's very important we have regulatory clarity, and hopefully we're going to get that here in the US, and that will be very valuable in terms of allowing our companies to grow faster, make more money, and be better investments for all of us. So thank you very much, Ron. I'm going to let you go.